On the night of October 14, 2011, the quiet neighborhood of Redwood Close was wrapped in an unsettling silence. Streetlights flickered, dogs refused to bark, and a thick fog settled low over the asphalt. To outsiders, it looked like any other suburban street. But by sunrise, Redwood Close would become the center of one of the most disturbing crime investigations that never officially happened. Redwood Close was known for being uneventful. Retirees watered their lawns at dawn. Children rode bicycles until dusk. Police reports were rare, and when they did appear, they were usually about noise complaints or misplaced mail. That calm is what made the events of that night so difficult to understand and so easy to ignore. At approximately 11:47 p.m., multiple residents later claimed they heard a sound they couldn't explain. Some described it as a metallic scrape. Others said it sounded like a low scream, muffled, as if swallowed by the fog itself. No one called the police. No one opened their door. Everyone assumed someone else would handle it. The next morning, 32-year-old Evan Cole failed to show up for work. Evan was a data analyst, punctual to the minute and deeply routine-driven. When his phone went straight to voicemail and his car remained parked in his driveway, his employer contacted his emergency contact, his sister, Mara Cole. Mara arrived at Evan's house just after noon. According to her latest statement, the front door was unlocked, the television was still on, and a cup of coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing looked disturbed, but Evan was gone. Police initially treated Evan's disappearance as voluntary. There were no signs of forced entry, no history of mental illness, no evidence of a struggle. Redwood Close stayed quiet, and within 48 hours, the case was quietly downgraded from missing person to pending. What changed everything was a call placed 3 days later, a call that would never appear in official records. A woman living 2 houses down from Evan claimed she found something behind her trash bins early that morning. She described it as small, dark, and definitely not trash. By the time officers arrived, whatever she claimed to have seen was gone. No photos were taken. No samples were collected. The report simply stated, nothing of evidentiary value located. But the woman would later tell friends she believed it was a severed fingertip. As days passed, more residents began to remember things they hadn't mentioned before. A white van idling too long. Footsteps at 3 a.m., a man standing under a streetlight, staring at Evan's house without moving. Each detail taken alone meant nothing. Together, they formed something far more unsettling. Detective Lucas Hargreave was assigned to the case reluctantly. With no body and no crime scene, there was little to investigate, but Hargreave would later admit that Redwood Close felt wrong. The street was too clean, too cooperative, as if everyone was trying very hard to forget something. Detective Hargreave began by doing what the department hadn't done yet. He walked the street alone at night. No sirens, no uniform, just a notebook and the same fog residents kept mentioning. At 12:03 a.m., he noted something odd. The streetlights did not flicker randomly. They dimmed in sequence, one after another, as if timed. Hargreave knocked on doors again, this time after midnight. Some residents refused to answer. Others spoke in whispers, even though they were indoors. One man insisted Evan Cole had argued loudly with someone on the sidewalk the night he disappeared. When asked why he hadn't reported it earlier, the man said, "Because I didn't think it was my business." Footage from nearby houses yielded nothing, or at least that's what the official report said. Unofficially, a technician mentioned corrupted files between 11:30 p.m. and 12:15 a.m. on every camera facing Evan's house. The rest of the night recorded normally. Mara Cole began pushing back publicly. She contacted local media, accusing the police of negligence. In one interview, she stated, "My brother didn't vanish, someone helped him disappear." The segment aired once. It was never rebroadcast. Days later, Mara received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a printed photograph of Evan's living room, taken from an angle that did not match any known camera position. On the back, written in shaky ink, were 4 words, "He never left." Police dismissed the letter as a hoax. Hargreave did not. He compared the photograph to the house and noticed something chilling. The coffee cup on the counter was still full. The timestamp on the photo suggested it had been taken 2 days after Evan vanished. Attention slowly turned toward a man named Caleb Rowe, a private contractor who had worked briefly on the sewer system beneath Redwood Close months earlier. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and always watching the ground. No criminal record, no clear motive. When questioned, Rowe provided receipts proving he was in another town the night Evan disappeared. Surveillance confirmed it. But Hargreave noticed something strange. Rowe knew Evan's name without being told. Under further questioning, Rowe corrected himself, claiming he'd seen Evan's missing poster earlier that day. The poster, however, had not yet been printed. Shortly after this interview, Rowe packed up his tools and left the city. His phone number disconnected. His rental property abandoned. Inside, police found dozens of photographs taped to the walls, all of Redwood Close, taken at night over many months. Some photos showed people in their windows, unaware they were being watched. Others focused on storm drains, sewer covers, and basements. One photograph stood out. It showed Evan Cole standing at his front door, frozen mid-motion. Behind him, reflected faintly in the glass, was another figure. The figure's face was blurred, but it was tall, too tall, and it appeared to be smiling. For the first time, the department acknowledged the possibility of foul play. Search teams were sent into the sewer tunnels beneath Redwood Close. The tunnels were older than city records suggested, some dating back nearly a century. 40 minutes into the search, one officer reported hearing footsteps behind him, matching his pace exactly. When he stopped, they stopped. When he turned around, the tunnel was empty. The search was officially called off after a structural safety concern. Unofficially, 2 officers requested transfers the next day. One quit law enforcement entirely. Mara Cole claimed she was being followed. She reported waking up to wet footprints leading from her bathroom to her bedroom door. Police found no evidence. That same night, her house alarm triggered at 2:17 a.m. Motion detected in the living room. No intruder was found. Detective Hargreave began documenting his thoughts privately. In a notebook later obtained by journalists, he wrote, "Whatever took Evan doesn't come from outside the street, it's part of it." One final development shook the case. A construction crew repairing a collapsed drain uncovered something wrapped in plastic. It was human. Partial remains. The coroner identified them as Evan Cole, but noted something impossible. The remains showed no signs of decomposition. According to lab estimates, death had occurred less than 48 hours prior, nearly 3 weeks after Evan was last seen alive. The official conclusion labeled the case inconclusive. No suspects were charged. The evidence was sealed. Detective Hargreave resigned 6 months later without explanation. After Evan Cole's remains were discovered, something subtle but undeniable changed on Redwood Close. Residents reported a constant smell of damp concrete, even on dry days. Basement lights flickered without explanation. Several homeowners complained that their floor drains made noises at night, not gurgling, but rhythmic, almost like breathing. A forensic pathologist, interviewed years later under anonymity, described Evan's body as wrong. Organs appeared preserved beyond natural possibility. Muscle tissue showed signs of stress usually seen in people who had been alive during prolonged confinement. According to the pathologist, Evan had not been killed quickly. Despite these findings, no homicide ruling was issued. Internal emails later leaked suggested pressure from city officials to keep the case quiet. Redwood Close sat directly above critical infrastructure. A scandal there, one email warned, would invite questions we cannot answer. Hannah Vire, who would later dedicate 2 years to investigating the case, described hitting walls everywhere she turned. Requests for records were delayed or denied. Witnesses changed their stories. Some refused to speak at all, claiming they had been advised not to remember too much. Hannah eventually tracked down Detective Hargreave. He was living alone in a coastal town far from Redwood Close. At first, he refused to talk. When he finally agreed, he insisted the interview be conducted outside, and only during daylight. During the interview, Hargreave revealed something that had never been documented. On the night Evan disappeared, police radios across the district briefly picked up a transmission. No voice, just a low-frequency hum lasting 11 seconds. The source could not be traced. According to Hargreave, the hum matched vibrations recorded in the sewer tunnels beneath Redwood Close. It wasn't a sound, he said. It was pressure, like the street itself was shifting. Hannah dug deeper. She discovered Redwood Close had been constructed over the remains of an abandoned residential block demolished in the 1940s. Records showed multiple unexplained disappearances in that earlier neighborhood, cases dismissed due to wartime chaos. The pattern was identical. Adult men, no signs of struggle, vanished from their homes at night. Bodies, when found, showed delayed death inconsistent with timelines. Residents who moved away from Redwood Close reported nightmares that followed them. Dreams of narrow corridors, of being watched from below. One former resident claimed she woke every night at exactly 11:47 p.m., the same time Evan Cole was last seen. New families moved into Redwood Close over the years, unaware of its history. Property prices remained suspiciously low. Disclosure documents mentioned nothing beyond minor drainage issues. 2016, a young man named Tyler Boone rented Evan Cole's former house. Within weeks, he complained to friends about noises under the floor. He joked about something knocking back when he stomped. On November 2nd, Tyler failed to show up for work. His phone was found on the kitchen table. A cup of coffee sat untouched beside it. This time, police responded faster. The house was searched thoroughly. Nothing appeared disturbed. But during the inspection, an officer noticed fresh condensation forming on the basement walls, despite no pipes running through them. Thermal imaging revealed heat beneath the concrete floor, moving slowly from one side of the basement to the other. The image was dismissed as faulty equipment. The report was amended. The file was closed within 72 hours. Hannah published her investigation online after every major outlet declined it. The article went viral briefly, then vanished. Archived copies became corrupted, screenshots blurred, videos analyzing the case were removed for policy violations. Before her work disappeared completely, Hannah received a single message from an unknown account: "Streets are built to hold things." Today, Redwood Close still exists. Children still ride bicycles, lights still flicker in sequence at night, and every few years a resident leaves without explanation. Urban geologist Dr. Samuel Klein was one of the few experts willing to speak on record. He specialized in underground structural failures and subsurface pressure zones. When shown maps of Redwood Close, he paused for several seconds before speaking. According to Dr. Klein, the sewer network beneath Redwood Close was not behaving like a normal system. Sensors showed slow, deliberate pressure shifts, not random erosion. Infrastructure doesn't move with intent, he said. Unless something else is using it. Klein explained that prolonged vibration beneath structures can create what he called resonant pockets, areas where sound, pressure, and movement reinforce each other over time. In theory, such pockets could distort perception, time awareness, and even biological processes. When asked whether human could survive for weeks underground in such an environment, Klein hesitated. Survive, he repeated. Yes, but not unchanged. Expert psychologist Dr. Lena Morris focused on the street's effect on behavior. She reviewed testimonies from residents and identified a pattern of shared avoidance. People noticed things, noises, figures, smells, but instinctively chose not to act. This isn't denial, Dr. Morris explained. It's suppression, a learned response. Something in that environment discourages intervention. Vira attempted one final visit to Redwood Close late in her investigation. She arrived just before midnight and parked near Evan Cole's former home. The street was quiet, no wind, no insects. She later described the silence as pressurized. Exactly 11:47 p.m., Hannah recorded audio on her phone. For 11 seconds, the recording captured a low-frequency vibration, almost identical to the police radio interference Hargreave had mentioned years earlier. Beneath the hum, there was another sound, faint, human. Someone breathing slowly from far below. Hannah left immediately. She never returned to Redwood Close. 2 weeks later, she announced she was stepping away from journalism entirely. No explanation was given. City officials continued denying any irregularities. Maintenance crews were instructed to avoid deep tunnel inspections in the area. New concrete was poured over several access points for safety. Former residents began contacting each other online. Many reported similar dreams, narrow corridors, dim lights, and the sensation of being watched from beneath their feet. None of them had known each other previously. One former resident claimed he heard a voice in his dream whisper his name, followed by an address. The address was his old house on Redwood Close. Property records reveal that houses on Redwood Close change ownership more frequently than any other street in the district. Very few residents stay longer than 3 years. Yet curiously, the street has never been condemned. In 2021, a short internal memo surfaced from the city's infrastructure department. It consisted of one sentence: Redwood Close remains stable as long as removal events are spaced appropriately. The memo was retracted within hours. No clarification was issued. Detective Hargreave reached once more for comment, offered only a warning. If you live there, he said, don't listen to the noises, and whatever you do, don't go looking for what's missing. Officially, Evan Cole's case remains unsolved. Unofficially, it has been forgotten, buried beneath paperwork, concrete, and silence. But Redwood Close does not forget. The prevailing theory among the few remaining investigators was never written down. It existed only in private notes, encrypted messages, and conversations that stopped abruptly when someone else entered the room. The theory suggested Redwood Close was not the site of crimes, but a system designed to manage them. According to this idea, the street functioned like a pressure valve. Something beneath it accumulated force over time, biological, structural, or otherwise, and required periodic release. The disappearances were not random, they were spaced, controlled. The victims shared subtle similarities, all lived alone, all maintained rigid routines, all were noticed but not closely known, people whose absence could be rationalized. Urban planners reviewing historical maps noticed that every previous neighborhood built on the site followed the same layout, same curve in the road. Same number of houses, same sewer access points. The street had been rebuilt repeatedly but never redesigned. When demolition crews tore down the original block in the 1940s, one foreman recorded an incident in his personal diary. He wrote of a collapse underground that exposed a cavity too large to measure and an odor like wet lungs. The entry ended with a sentence scratched so deeply it tore the paper. We sealed it because it asked us to. Modern engineers dismissed the diary as stress-induced hallucination, but none could explain why the cavity described in the diary matched current pressure anomalies beneath Redwood Close almost exactly. Some theorized the structure below was never meant to be accessed, only fed. Not with food but with presence. Human activity above maintained equilibrium below. When that equilibrium faltered, the system compensated. Late 2023, a utility worker named Aaron Pike entered a maintenance tunnel beneath Redwood Close for routine inspection. His radio transmission was calm at first. Then he stopped speaking mid-sentence. The last sound recorded was slow breathing, not his own. Pike emerged from the tunnel 37 minutes later. He was alive, but he could not explain where he had been. Medical scans showed pressure trauma consistent with extreme depth, deeper than the tunnels extended. Before being sedated, Pike reportedly whispered one sentence: "It knows the difference between people who stay and people who leave." That same year, Redwood Close experienced no disappearances. City records show increased funding allocated quietly to underground reinforcement. No new residents were warned. No investigations reopened. Today, if you walk Redwood Close at night, you might notice something strange. The streetlights still dim in sequence. But occasionally, one light stays on longer than the others, as if waiting. Residents who look down storm drains sometimes report reflections that don't match their movements. And every so often, a house goes up for sale with no explanation. The listing photos show a familiar detail: a full cup of coffee on the counter. Authorities maintain there is no danger, that the street is safe, stable, normal, but stability, as the internal memo warned, depends on spacing. Evan Cole was not the first to disappear on Redwood Close, and if the pattern holds, he will not be the last, because some places are not built for living, they are built for holding, and Redwood Close is still hungry.